I'm Katrina, and this is Sew and Tare.
Here's the recipe we're making today, Fudge Nut Pie. And this recipe is something that my grandma, we think, got out of a magazine years ago. It's been a family tradition. And so that's pretty cool. Anyway, so it uses a double boiler. I don't have a double boiler, so I use a pan with water and a metal bowl with a metal bottom. And what that does is we're going to use the steam from the bottom. You don't ever want the water to touch the bottom of the bowl. You just want it to, the steam to heat. And what that does is it prevents the chocolate from melting. Now, this recipe calls for 2 squares of chocolate. If you look at any old recipe, chocolate, this is unsweetened chocolate. Chocolate squares have changed. So this chocolate squares used to be double thick, like that, and now they've made them thinner and they sell them for the same price. So, for the current type of unsweetened chocolate, this is really this is really 4 squares. And they kind of hide that on the back of the chocolate. Now it says that 2 squares equals 1 ounce. It used to be 1 square equals 1 ounce. Alright, so this is pretty much melted. Something you have to pay attention to if you're going to use a bowl like this as a double boiler is that, especially once the steam starts, it does slip sometimes like that. So you have to have, a hot pad on hand. But I think this is good and melty now. You remove it from the heat and add the brown sugar and butter. We are doing a 1/2 cup brown sugar. It calls for light brown sugar. I don't have light brown sugar, so I'm using dark brown sugar. Usually what I use, because it's usually what's in the stores. And it's delicious still. Now, if you've never measured brown sugar before, this is what you're supposed to do. So just pour it in, and then you're supposed to actually pack it. Brown sugar is always measured as a packed sugar. And we have a little too much, so we're going to put it back. Alright, there's our 1/2 cup. We're adding this and the 1/4 cup butter. This is a softened butter. It doesn't have to be, but it will melt faster if it's softened. So if you plan ahead, this is a good thing to do. Alright, now ordinarily I use my KitchenAid to beat things, but in this case we're not doing that because it needs to go back on the double boiler and all that. I need to add the granulated sugar, which is white sugar, and beat again. A 3/4 cup granulated sugar. And beat again. All right, next is eggs. We're supposed to add them and beat after each egg, but I am using quail eggs today, so 3 quail eggs equals about 12, sorry, 3 chicken eggs equal about 12 quail eggs. It's a little extra yolk in there, but that's okay. It'll be extra rich. So, I'm going to add, not after every single one, I'll add after every few. Or beat after every few. I'm using these egg scissors, quail egg scissors, for cutting them. Very handy dandy. If you've ever tried to open these without quail scissors, and then you found out they were quail scissors, you'd be like, what? There are quail scissors? How did I not know that? Okay, next is salt, eggs, and maple syrup. You can use corn syrup if you want, but it's better with maple syrup. The salt is 1/4 teaspoon. I use pink Himalayan salt. And we need a 1/2 cup milk and a 1/4 cup maple syrup. So what I do with liquid measurements like this that are easy to measure is I just do them right on top of each other using real maple syrup. Okay, I'm going to turn back on my water for my double boiler, because we're going to need that after we beat this. Make sure I get out as much of that yummy maple syrup as possible. Alright, beat until foamy. This is about the consistency that I cook it to. And then it goes back on double boiler. Alright. So it is back on the double boiler. And I just realized I put the spoon with the chocolate there and it kind of burned. So don't do that. So the instructions say to put it back on the double boiler over hot, not boiling water to cook. So turn this down, and this has always been kind of a interesting instruction because it just says to cook, not for how long. And you'll see kind of what I do, what consistency I go with. You might try something else, it might turn out better, I don't know. Getting thick. So while this is cooking, we are going to go chop up a cup of finely chopped nuts. I'm using walnuts today. You can use pecans. I've done hazelnuts before. Whatever type of nut works best for you is the type you should use. How I chop nuts is I put them close together. You want to make sure you don't cut your fingers. turn the whole pie out when I do this. Surprisingly, when I went to the store, the the half walnuts were less expensive than the pieces, which is kind of funny because usually the pieces are less expensive because that's their oopses. So I got most of them. There's a couple ones that are, yep, it's still a little bigger in here. You can target those now. Alright, let's see how much that is. Alright, we need some more. Well, I made too much. It's alright, we can save this for later. Alright, so that is about a cup. Checking on our pie. It looks good. So it's been about 12 minutes. I never know how long to cook this thing. But it looks good. And give it a few more minutes. So I always make my pie crust ahead. I have a recipe. This is a double pie, so we're only going to use half of it. But I put it in the freezer. That way you can pull it out, let it thaw, and make pie anytime. Let's mix in. Preheat the oven to 350. Bring you guys over here. And mix in our nuts and 1 teaspoon vanilla extract. Alright, it is time for our chilled pie crust to be filled. Oops. And for us to put this in the oven. So I'm going to use one last mix, otherwise all the nuts will be at the bottom. Get ready for some yumminess. Okay, this cooks for 55 minutes, and then we're going to put 1/4 cup of broken walnuts on top and cook for another 5 minutes. Just so you know your time. So 55 minutes has passed, and we're going to take this out, and it looks nice and yummy. And we are just going to sprinkle some walnuts on. And put it back in for 5 more minutes. So here is the final product.